I've gone from being a pastor in my local church
Satan is there whispering doubts in our minds
to becoming a successful adult model. A few years ago, we were broke. I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't know my purpose. But then I had my awakening, shifted, and I've become who I was always meant to be. I've transformed my life in some pretty shocking ways.
If you could go back in time and make different decisions, would you do that?
Man, that's a good question. God, I have to warm up a minute. Let's see. I was raised in a very conservative, religious environment. This messaging was, when you become a wife and a mother, you've reached the pinnacle of womanhood. And I tried to become that woman for most of my life. Decided I want to be a preacher and a pastor. I want to tend to my flock and help people and bring people together. The church where I rose up as a pastor is a mega church. It's a huge community. There's thousands of people. Standing on stage, in the spotlight, thousands of eyes on you was like a dream come true for me.
You guys are a rowdy bunch in here. I love it.
There we go.
When I was a pastor, I still was ascribing to the belief that I am responsible for how men view me. I would spend so much time over my outfit. Like, don't wear too tight of jeans. And I remember thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't wear high heels because that can be seen as like provocative or a little more sexy. And that was just a lifetime of training. Shaming women, body shame, sex shame, victim shaming. You always need to live in fear.
It's important to remember why we need God.
It was so toxic, it was so controlling, it was so unhealthy.
Why God is everything we hunger for.
But then I had my awakening.
Maybe we're afraid that if people knew who we really were, they would reject us.
I realized my queerness and I kept it closeted.
God loves us and there's nothing that can separate us from God's love.
I felt terrifyingly alone.
The longer we keep these fears and these doubts and these questions to ourselves, the more we have to pretend.
Even though this church was the most open-minded and progressive church I'd ever been part of, sex or even sexuality was still one of those topics that was not talked about. There was this pressure to fit within the mold, and as a queer woman in a very straight, male-dominant church, I was afraid that I was too much and I would get in trouble. I knew if I owned my queerness fully, I would likely lose my job at my church. And eventually got to the point where I couldn't hide it, and I decided to come out publicly. So today's is a big day, and that's what I did. I am publicly coming out of the closet. I am queer. I'm attracted to people, period. Hey!
Hello, come in.
If I was still a pastor, what I do now would be unacceptable. I've transformed my life in some pretty shocking ways. There are days I regret being raised the way I was raised, being raised in the church and super religious, because I feel like I was denied so many experiences. It was in 2018 that I finally scheduled my first boudoir shoot. It had been something I had wanted to do for years, and it felt so beautiful and tasteful and artistic and expressive. And the more I did it, the more I wanted of that. When I started my OnlyFans, I remember being really nervous about how my people would react. So before I posted, I wrote a social media post on all my social media accounts saying, I've decided to do this thing, and here's why. I'm preparing you. So when you start seeing more sexy photos, this is why. Unfriend or unfollow me now if this is not something you want in your life. And now it's become a full-blown money-making job that I love. I've gone from being a pastor in my local church to becoming a successful adult model. Now I make between $30,000 to $100,000 a month.
How'd the shoot go?
It was so good. I loved it. That was the first time I worked with that photographer, and it was so good.
I have a similar background and upbringing to hers. I grew up in a really religious family. It was conservative.
Cheers.
Cheers. I know that there's this sensational story about Nikole as pastor turned stripper, but when you meet her and you start talking to her, you just see this amazing person that's underneath all of that. If you could go back in time and make different decisions, would you do that?
Man, that's a good question. They're happy tears.
Okay, good, because I feel like a jerk now. I'm sorry.
If I could do something differently, I would have done this years ago. So much has changed, and yet, like, deep in me, you know, the voice is like, this is just the beginning. Like, there's so much more coming my way. Oh my gosh, so much has changed for the better. A few years ago, we were broke. I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't know my purpose. This would never be possible in my old life. I am so much happier than I used to be.